Welcome to the live episode of Fool Me Twice podcast. Today, I am your host, and with me, I have my co-host, Sean. Today, we're getting into a story that may have been buried for the past 30 years. We're going to be talking about the cover-up, the eyewitness disparities, and what actually happened on the 30th anniversary of the TWA Flight 800 crash. So, this is being broken up into two parts. So tonight is part one, and then we're going to do part two in the next couple of weeks. We don't have a definitive deadline or date that we're doing that at this time, but that's our game plan. And we are trying to get our show established and have people, tune in, know when we're going live, things like that, see when an episode has been uploaded. So if you could please do us a favor and like and subscribe to our show. We are on Rumble and YouTube and Spotify at this time. I plan on going to more platforms later, but right now we're on the basic three. So if you could do that, we would really appreciate it. And of course, if there's somebody who would be interested in the subject, please consider sharing the show with us. We really have put in a ton of work, and we would love to have other people engage and see what they think, add to the conversation, and we would love to hear from you as well. So please do us a favor, like, subscribe, and share. And without further ado, my co-host, Sean. How are you doing today, Sean?
I'm doing good. Thank you. I'm excited. I'm ready for this. How are you feeling?
Very good. We've put in a lot of time and prep work into getting the show ready. And, we've had some hiccups here and there, but we made it, and I'm ready to get into it.
Awesome. Let's jump right into it. TWA Flight 800, the 30-year anniversary, part one. Let's start with a dedication. We're dedicating this episode and our bringing about this research to those who lost their lives on July 17th, 1996, 30 years ago. We dedicate this to also the pilots, the flight attendants, and the crews of the airplanes that fly us through the sky currently. Whether we think of it or not, we are quite vulnerable up in the sky, and this is proof of it, that anything can happen in the sky as well as in a car. But when we're up in an airplane, we're putting our lives in someone else's hands. So dedicate it to the victims and the victims' families. Dedicate this to the pilots and flight attendants currently in work, as well as the researchers, the whistleblowers, the truthers that have been actively working to keep this story alive. Some of them are no longer with us, some under mysterious circumstances. Some of them have gone into hiding, and some are still trying to crack this case wide open, and hopefully we can shed some light on it and help them.
Yeah, I agree. Whenever you said that you wanted to talk about this, we'll get into it a little bit more, but I am glad that we are, because if something like this had happened to me or my family, I would hope that there are still people out there who cared about the truth. And this is not an isolated incident. There are many of these cases that have very strange involvement. This is a fact government involvement, and they do not have answers to this day. And of course, it's TWA Flight 800 that we're discussing today, but something else that comes to my mind, and this was pre-Clinton years, but it was the Boys on the Tracks. And if you're not familiar with that story, I recommend that you check it out. But to this day, the boys on the tracks, their families are still trying to get justice for them and to get answers. And it's also OKC and many other things. And we'll get into that.
Absolutely. There's an official story to TWA Flight 800. And I'm sure there are some victims' families that needed the closure, and they jumped onto it. They latched onto it, and it was comforting. And I have no issue with that. I'm not trying to change their minds. This is just bringing to light some of the inconsistencies with that official story, the Wikipedia timeline of events. And we may be wrong, and I'll be the first to admit that, because we still really don't know what the hell happened that night, and we may never know. But part of Ashley and I doing the show is questioning official stories, questioning official narratives. And that's exactly what we're doing here tonight, along with a dedication. There's a reason we're doing it tonight, obviously.
And I would also say, Sean, before we get into it, is that we're questioning the official story, not just to question the official story, but because there are many things that do not make sense. And oftentimes these types of stories get completely buried. And you had mentioned this even in our earlier, promo for today on this week, that these people, that so many people seem to have forgotten that the story is very important, but it seems to have been memory hold. So hopefully we're helping to, at least fight back against that somewhat.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So let's jump into it.
Okay, next slide.
Next slide. Sorry. All right. Here are some valuable resources for the viewer, for the listener out there. A number of books, a number of documentaries. For this two-part presentation, I pulled from all of these sources, from internet blogs, from articles, from various researchers, mainly the four sources that you see on the screen. In particular, Jack Cashell's book, TWA, The Crash, The Cover-Up, and The Conspiracy. And I used that book kind of as a guideline for this presentation, for the reason that it wasn't just 400 pages of chemistry evidence. It is probably 50% evidence, but there's heavy coverage into the cover-up and the conspiracy, what was going on behind the scenes, what happened to the whistleblowers, what happened to the witnesses. And that's why I chose that book specifically as a guideline in this, but I will be pulling information from other sources. We've got the downing of TWA Flight 800 from James Sanders. He features heavily with Jack Cashell's work. There's the documentary that they produced together called Silenced. There's also the documentary that was out in 2013, I think, called TWA Flight 800. That was from the TWA Working Group, I believe it's called, and it's got Christina Borgeson in it and a number of others. And we will be covering some of that in the latter half. But again, I'm pulling from all of these sources. Quick note on Jack Cashell, writer, journalist of TWA 800, this book right here. He has many books, many TV interviews. He's been on many shows. He's not without bias. He is very anti-left and anti-liberal. He's very anti-Clinton and anti-Obama. So there's a little bias there. Yes. I'm not promoting his other works. I haven't read it. I don't care. What I'm promoting is his research into TWA Flight 800. I will praise this work that he's done into TWA Flight 800. His anti-Clinton ideology actually fits with this story because this event occurred under their purview. So I did start looking into what he was saying because I wanted to give it more than a grain of salt into what was going on in the Clinton administration during this disaster, this airline disaster. So he was justifiably right in bashing the Clintons and their handling of this. But so getting the bias out of the way, let me start with a question. Ashley, back in 1996 in July, on the 17th, the TWA 800 goes down. Is that when you heard about it? Was it the next day? Where were you? What were you doing? What do you know of it?
I have to say that I really this was something that was not on my radar. And it's interesting because we had our live this week in preparation for the show. And we talked about all of these scandals and events that happened in the 90s. And I was very familiar with many of them. And I do remember where I was when I heard about them. This is not one of them. So I was thinking, I wonder if I was I don't know. What was I doing? Maybe I was just paying attention to the 96 Olympics or something. I really don't know, Sean. So this was not on my radar at all. I really know nothing about it.
Fantastic. I can't wait to surprise you. Uh, I didn't hear about this when I was 10 years old the night of. It was the next morning at summer camp that the counselors were talking about it. And then I heard it on the radio, and then it was everywhere. And it was all over newspapers. And I was a paper boy at the time. So it was on the newspapers of the papers I was delivering, above the fold.
Above the fold.
As you will. Let me revisit that for a moment for anyone that didn't watch our prelude on Tuesday. Above the fold is a journalism term, newspaper term. It is the goal of good writers and journalists to have their articles published in heavy duty newspapers above the fold, meaning take out those, Ashley, what's black and white and red all over? Newspapers, of course. Open up a newspaper to its full spread and fold it, place it on the rack for people to purchase at a newsstand. And above the fold means people walking up to see what was available, see your article. They don't even have to read it. They see the headline. They may see your name. They know the subject. I want to buy that. So it's a great goal for journalists to get a newspaper article above the fold, but it's also an opportunity for the establishment to throw in the best propaganda they have. Because like I said, someone walking by doesn't even have to read the article. They read the emotive statement or title written by the editor, and propaganda does the rest. And then they think they know it all, kind of like headlines in articles on the internet today. What do you think, Ashley?
I think that is 100% correct. And obviously, these people know that. It is very well studied, very well known, especially by this point. The narrative managers have some time and expertise under their belt. And this is a good opportunity for me to mention our 2-part propaganda series that we did. If you listen, I don't know what order, it may say that it's 3 and 4. Who knows? Don't worry about that. Just know that we had to rearrange release dates in order to accommodate this, but a 2-part propaganda series where we are looking at PR, a social history of spin. And this type of thing is exactly right up the narrative manager's alley. And it also discusses the fact that newspapers have been consolidated since at least the 1920s, and all the way from the heavy hitters down to your local small towns. And of course, it has become much more obvious in later dates, but this is certainly an example of consolidation coming from the big newspapers, and certainly being used here.
Absolutely. So let's take ourselves back to 1996. Get yourself in the mindset. I was 10 years old, but not everyone out there is going to be 10 years old. So picture yourself in 1996. This is just days before the United States hosts the Summer Olympics. So people are very excited about that. They could rightfully so be a little bit on edge. And this was just 4 weeks after a Saudi hotel bombing. This was also above the fold for several weeks because we lost 19 servicemen there. This was allegedly a Hezbollah, I think they blamed it on.
Oh
At
boy.
least that's the official story. Iran and Hezbollah. No, I have no idea. I would question any official story, but there was a hotel bombing by a food truck in Saudi Arabia that injured over 200 people and killed several, including 19 Air Force servicemen from the United States in Saudi Arabia. So the terrorism alert at the time was on high alert. So we've got the Summer Olympics coming up. We've got a couple weeks after a Saudi bombing where we lost several Americans. And it's also an election year. These strange phenomena always happen during elections years, 2020, 2024, 1996. How ironic. Strange things happen during election years, huh? And they just turned off CERN. That's totally irrelevant, but I just wanted to mention that. So it was a re-election year in 1996 for President Clinton. So he's a little bit on edge. And at the time of this, he's doing his tours because he wants re-election. So let's go to the next slide, Ashley, if you will, please. The official story of TWA Flight 800. Let's get into it. On July 17th, 1996, TWA Flight 800, a Boeing 747, flying from New York City to Rome with a stop in Paris, exploded about 13,700 feet over the Atlantic Ocean near East Moriches, New York, killing all 230 people on board. The National Transportation Safety Board, we will be going into them later, conducted a 4-year investigation and released its final report on August 23rd of 2000. Their official findings were that the probable cause was explosion of flammable fuel vapors in the center wing fuel tank. Most likely ignition source was a short circuit in wiring associated with the fuel quantity indication system that entered the tank. How does that make you feel, Ashley?
Okay, so just to clarify with you, Sean, we're going on a journey through what we're talking about. And originally, there was this theory, then there was this theory, and then the official story that we landed on was none of those things were at play. This was a problem with the plane.
Yep, missiles were rambled about in the papers, bombs, terrorists. We kind of jumped back and forth like we didn't know what the answer was. And this is what the official investigators came up with, that this was the cause of it, after kind of jumping through hoops and throwing away a lot of the witness testimony for years that we will get into. Ashley, were any planes recalled immediately after to make sure this didn't happen again?
No.
Oh, you don't say. Huh. Fancy that. So I added this little graphic on the right of Long Island and about how far from JFK Airport the plane made it before it made its final fiery descent into the ocean at 8:31 p.m. All right, let's get a little bit into the book. I don't want to ramble too much. Jack Cashell's book starts with FBI witness number 73. She had contacted the author, Jack Cashell, in 2009 after reading his book, First Strike, that he wrote with James Sanders, who we'll talk about later. For privacy, Jack refers to her as Sandy. She kind of stays in the shadows now, and you'll know why soon. Sandy was the perfect eyewitness. She worked in the travel industry and was an avid aviation enthusiast. The night of TWA 800, she was on the beach at Moriches Inlet on the south shore of Long Island. She saw a red streak moving up from sea level at a 45-degree angle. It was leaving a gray smoke trail. It passed TWA 800 on its right side before arcing back towards the craft's right wing. She described it in her FBI interview as an upside-down Nike swoosh. That was the arc, the missile she thought she saw took as it went past the plane and turned around and went right back towards it. The streak ended near the right wing, and she heard a crack. Then she observed a fire on the aircraft with 1 or 2 secondary explosions with a much deeper sound. Then she watched the craft split into 2 and fall, burning to the ground. She was less than 10 miles away. That was from her 1996 interview, what I just described to you. The second interview, April 29th, 1997, the FBI went to her, questioned her. In their report, again, through Freedom of Information Act and through a lot of this is public information, y'all can look it up on your own, the FBI added she'd been heavily drinking the night of the 17th of July, 1996. They also mentioned that some of her details were changing, so she must not be credible. So we've talked about her first interview and her second, and that's what she contacted Jack Cashell about. She wanted to talk about her interviews, specifically the second interview, because she had 2 problems with it, with this second interview that was conducted by the FBI. First off, she doesn't drink ever. So the FBI is lying. The second problem was that there was no second interview. The FBI made it entirely up. This left her furious. And through a lot of digging and interviews, Sanders and Cashill did find several eyewitnesses that had false second interviews, where their first interview was legit, written down word for word. Their second one was entirely made up, and all of a sudden the details have changed, or something made them less credible. Like they're drunk. I think they wrote that she had been drinking Long Island iced teas that night. How creative, FBI, on Long Island. Just for reference, by the way, 700 witnesses, that's 700 witnesses were interviewed by the FBI. According to the National Transportation Safety Board, 258 witnesses saw a rising streak of light. 56 of those traced the light to the ground or horizon. The New York Times, by the way, practically own the story. They were filtering out their articles through their subsidiaries, and many, doesn't mean all of them, but many other newspapers were just getting their information straight from the New York Times. So more or less they own the story. They were getting all their information, by the way, from the FBI, the New York Times. They had insider FBI information, of course. Anyway, the New York Times interviewed 0 witnesses. That's 0. So over 800 witnesses saw this, and the biggest newspaper covering it talked to 0 of them. Pretty incredible. How does that make you feel, Ashley?
Well, it's obviously very frustrating, especially because we talked about a playbook, right? And these instances occur over and over and over. And it's the people with the monopoly on violence who are never responsible. They're never held accountable for lying, for being dishonest, for not getting people the answers that they deserve. And, you know, at the very least, like, this is fact. This is a lie. They lied. Why would you do that? So that is a question that remains unanswered. Clearly, when people lie, when organizations lie, they have a motivation to do so. What was the motivation to do so? And again, we talked about this in our prelude episode earlier this week, but that is so many things that are happening today. But of course, during the 90s, Waco, OKC, there was 1,000 other things that happened in the 90s as well, that this was a similar type situation. So it's just terrible. It's frustrating.
Unbelievably frustrating is correct. Now, let me give you a little snippet, a little foreshadow from Jack Cashill's book. That same night, Captain Ray Ott and his crew on a Navy surveillance plane, the P-3 Orion, were flying almost directly above TWA Flight 800 when it exploded. After circling for half an hour and shooting video of the debris field, the plane quit the scene and headed south 200 miles on a routine sub-hunting exercise. No entity in the military arsenal was as capable of hunting down any suspected terrorists as the P-3, but Ott had orders to do otherwise. Get the ball rolling in your head.
Okay, so you're saying that another plane who was flying, but they were flying higher than this, observed what happened? Okay.
Yeah, there were, as we'll come to find, there were other planes in the area that did see this from out their windows. But this was a Navy P-3 Orion, a very sophisticated submarine hunting ship. So it's sensing things in the water, it's sensing planes around them, and it just so happened to be flying above TWA 800. And then and it did video the debris field, and we'll talk about it later, for a half hour, and then it flew away and went 200 miles south to continue its submarine hunting exercise. So if there was terrorists shooting down this plane that shot down TWA Flight 800, the P-3 Orion from the Navy was your top guy to find it, yet it bailed.
And wouldn't they also have the capability of seeing if there had been some type of missile launched? Wouldn't they have radar? Assumably, if you have the capability to detect submarines, you're looking at some sort of imaging, whether they're looking at thermal imaging or they're looking at radio signal or some type of, you know, I'm not the scientist here, Sean, but some sort of indicator that there is some heat signal, electricity, something, radio, something's going on. Wouldn't they be able to see that?
I like your thinking, but let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Okay.
We're leading to
Fine.
something. All right, let's jump to the next picture. Okay, there's computer generated image of TWA 800 and the debris that was collected at a very specific investigative hangar in Long Island. Let's jump to the next picture, Ashley. All right. So I know what you've been thinking. This plane goes down. Where the F was our power structure? Where were they? So at 8:31, TWA 800 goes down. At 8:34 p.m., a motorcade whisks the Clintons away from a DNC event and goes straight to the White House. Leon Panetta, who's pictured with the Clintons top right, Leon Panetta, his chief of staff, broke the news to them. They had an immediate emergency meeting in the Situation Room, the famed Situation Room, with the coordinating security group, the FBI, the CIA, the FAA, the Departments of Defense, Pentagon, and the Coast Guard. By 3 a.m., the Department of Justice got word to take over the investigation from the NTSB. Although arguably illegal, this move was made publicly. Less public, but more suspect, was the intervention of the CIA. The CIA was involved itself from day one and ultimately seized control of the investigation. Ironically, the same justice official who allowed the CIA to take over would be the same official who was chosen to, quote unquote, oversee its violation in the future, as you do. In the ensuing 5 years, this changed in 2001, of course. In the ensuing 5 years, the CIA, the FBI, and the White House largely avoided the subject of aviation terror, all to protect the secrets of what happened to TWA 800. Questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, conundrums, Ashley?
Yes, quick comment that I would say, in our other conversations that we've had, like Operation Mind Control, Walter Boert, the cryptocracy. This is the cryptocracy, at least a small little piece of that pie that you're looking at right here. And I had the same question about why the CIA would be involved, but then I was like, well, if they actually did, giving the benefit of the doubt, if they actually did think that there was a foreign missile attack or a terrorist attack, it would make sense for them to be briefed and included in the meeting. But then, of course, it doesn't make sense in regards to after the fact when they decided that this is just, oh, it's just a malfunction. That doesn't make sense. So it almost reminds me of we investigated ourselves and we found that we didn't do anything wrong. That's what that kind of reminds me of, that sort of potential for corruption.
Absolutely. Maybe they knew right away what went on. Maybe they had no idea. Or maybe they needed to come up with a story that fit the bill until they figured out what actually went down. Or maybe they're like, oh shit, we got to cover our asses from the get-go. It's an election year. We can't look bad. The Olympics is coming here in 2 days. We can't have this happening. We have to do something. So they get the top head honchos from Coast Guard, FAA, Departments of Defense, the Pentagon, the CIA, and the FBI, and they say, what can we do here? Let's make a deal. So a little background on the Sanders-Cashel duo. Let's go to the next picture, Ashley, if you would. Cool. Here's James Sanders' book, The Downing of TWA Flight 800, The Shocking Truth Behind the Worst Airplane Disaster in U.S. History. I tip my hat to Sanders. He was on the conspiracy train from the get-go after TWA went down. I believe this book came out in 1997. So the investigation ain't over. This is right after it happened. It's still fresh in people's minds, and he's already questioning it. So we tip our hats to him. So sorry, go on.
I was just going to say really quickly, these people did, as you had talked about earlier, they did put their necks on the line, and these people did suffer consequences for their involvement in trying to find out what happened.
Absolutely. Their lives were never the same. So Jack Cashel, who I keep referring to in this book, he meets James Sanders and his wife Elizabeth at a country club where they were giving a presentation on TWA 800 and their research. And this was in the year 2000. Sanders had already written The Downing of TWA Flight 800, so he is an OG in 1997. And his wife Elizabeth was a TWA flight attendant trainer who knew several aboard that night that lost their lives. So she was jumping on this from the get-go of wanting to know exactly what happened to her friends that perished on this plane. In Sanders' book, he writes that in 1997, and a 747 pilot named Terry Stacey, who worked at the site known as Calverton, where all of this wreckage was brought to and investigated. Terry Stacey worked at the site of the investigation and stole a piece of seat back after becoming concerned with what he witnessed during the investigation. This piece of seat back was mailed to Sanders so that he could test it because he knew something was up with this investigation. There was something fishy. Previous articles had been published by Sanders, which is why Stacey chose the Sanders to send this to. And shortly after Sanders is trying to get this tested for his book, Stacey was arrested by the FBI and had to plead his way down to a misdemeanor. The DOJ, of course, learned from this and went full force. Stacey later went into hiding, and the Sanders themselves became grand jury targets. There's way more to that story, but you'll have to read his story and look up information on him. It would take me 2 hours to go through all of James Sanders' story, but I'll continue a little bit more. After hearing their presentation, Jack Cashel begins digging and soon realizes that they might be right, that's the Sanderses might be right, that the agencies and the media walked hand in hand, claiming that any theory other than the official electrical source spark that ignited the center wing tank was the ramblings of a conspiracy cook. So Cashel says, fuck this, I'm making a documentary. And he flies out to Florida and spends 3 days with the Sanders couple. They lay out every piece of information they have, whether it's been published or not. They lay it all out in front of him and decide to team up with him on a documentary. So Cashel becomes the official kook conspiracy theorist, just like us, Ashley. And I will, before I ask you to comment, there is a little quote in this book that I really like. And it's one statement. In a totalitarian country, authorities can suppress information at will. In America, the media have to collaborate in that suppression.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I think that is, again, cryptocracy, because they appear to all be working together. And I think that we have enough documentation to say that with certainty, at least in some situations, in some stories. I would call to mind the very famous clip, "This is very dangerous to our democracy. This is dangerous to our democracy. This is very dangerous to our democracy." So we know that there is a certain amount of lockstep from government talking points to media talking heads. We obviously know about the Operation Mockingbird, many such standards. So.
Well said. Let's go to the next picture. Oh, and there you can see the Sanders family. And of course, they're being demonized in the paper. They're being sent to court. They're being questioned. The whole rigmarole. Demonize anyone questioning the official narrative.
Right. And the other thing that I thought was interesting, so they made this big deal that they stole Flight 800 material, which leaves it so ambiguous. But didn't you said it was a very small piece of fabric that was actually taken, right?
Yeah, it was a very small piece of fabric ripped off of one of the seat backs that was to be tested for explosives evidence.
Right. And then, of course, that begs the question, why wasn't the people that were in charge of the official investigation testing it for explosive material?
Oh, great question. I like where your head's at, and we're going to get there. I promise you. Let's go to the next picture.
This is just really quick, Sean. So we talked about this earlier. So Sean wanted a picture of Terry Stacey. He couldn't find one. I couldn't find one. This is an original article in, I don't even know what newspaper I found it in, but it was in a couple. So it came from a bigger, a bigger outlet that pushed it into other papers. And this is just saying that Janet Reno's Justice Department has indicted 3 people on the charge of stealing 2 tiny pieces of foam rubber. That's interesting. From one of the seats found in the wreckage of TWA Flight 800. Ironically, this is the same Justice Department which actively opposed independent counsel Donald, can't read that, his efforts to prosecute Ronald Blakely, the former chief of staff. Anyway, the point is that this discusses Terry Stacey in regard to his work with the couple, the Sanders couple that we were just talking about. So that's about as close as I could get. And it does, even at the end of this, it mentions when Sanders' book, The Downing of TWA Flight 800, was published in paperback last spring, the FBI was furious. And I also had come across a couple of different articles discussing this milieu. And apparently that book was very popular, like airport newsstand popular during that time. So I'm sure that they didn't like that. And the other thing that I was going to say is that I came across something that said that Terry Stacey felt pressured, like in one of his statements, he felt pressured by the Sanders to take the material, and he was uncomfortable with that. Now, that's hard to say if that's how he actually felt, or if that was simply because of now we're in legal trouble and I need to say something. I don't know, but I wanted to pass that along, Sean.
Very true. It could be him pleading down to his misdemeanor that made him say that. I don't know for sure. Regardless, piece of seat back foam rubber taken by him from the investigative site at Calverton, sent to the Sanders for explosive residue testing. Thank you for digging up those articles. And here it is. There's the documentary that they put together that the Sanders did with Jack Cashel, Silenced, Flight 800, and the Subversion of Justice. This focused on the silenced eyewitnesses and experts and the silenced evidence. I'm going to bear with me. I'm going to read about this documentary to give you a little bit more light into it. So here's what they share in the documentary. At 8:19 p.m. on a pleasantly cool evening, TWA Flight 800 left JFK Airport in New York with 230 people on board. Bound for Paris, the 747 headed east in fair skies along the affluent south coast of Long Island. 12 minutes into this so far uneventful flight, witnesses along the coast began to notice inexplicable phenomena in the sky. Mike Wire, working on a West Hampton bridge, watched as a flaming streak of light rose up from behind a beach house and zigzagged southeast away from shore. Senior Navy NCO Dwight Brumley saw another streak from his window seat thousands of feet above TWA Flight 800 on U.S. Air Flight 217. This second streak rose up towards his plane before leveling off and heading towards heading north towards Long Island on a course perpendicular to TWA 800s. Engineer Paul Angelides tracked the southbound streak from his West Hampton deck and then watched in awe as the northbound streak rose off the horizon. At 8:31 p.m., Wire, Brumley, Angelides, and hundreds of others, perhaps thousands, watched helplessly as TWA 800 exploded in midair. The Air National Guard pilot, Major Fritz Meyer, had little doubt what caused the plane to explode. Quote, "It was definitely a rocket motor," he said. "What I saw explode was definitely ordnance. I have enough experience. I saw 1, 2, 3, 4 explosions before the fireball." End quote. No one was in a better position to see. Meyer was in a helicopter over the Long Island shore facing southbound. "The plane broke jaggedly in the sky," says witness Lisa Perry. "The nose is continuing to go forward. The left wing is gliding off in its own direction, drifting in an arc gracefully down. The right wing and passenger window are doing the same in their direction, out to the right, and the tail with its fireball leaps up and then promptly falls into the water below." And that's from Lisa Perry. We'll talk about her again. In the course of Silenced, we told in brief the story of James and Elizabeth Sanders. We delved into the radar data, the physical evidence, the debris field, the rocket residue, the flight recorder data, the cockpit voice recorder, the characteristics of Jet A fuel, and other technical information. Without question, the most compelling part of the video was the eyewitness testimony. No network had ever interviewed Mike Wire, Lisa Perry, Paul Angelides, Dwight Brumley, or Major Fritz Meyer. Despite all the incentives not to, they continued to plead their case and go public with their dissent. We paid no one for his or her testimony. Added to the documentary was the explanation video that was released by the CIA. Now, do you have that pulled up, by the way, Ashley?
I do have that. So I have two videos, and they're short. I think this is maybe the right one. So let's give it a try.
All right. I'll describe it. It was the CIA, who shouldn't be involved in any of this investigation. This is their way of covering the ass of the establishment. While all of these witnesses claim they saw a fiery streak shooting upwards before they see the plane explode and fall to the ground, this covers their ass by, it was their explanation for it, that the plane exploded. There was an explosion in the center wing fuel tank, but nobody saw that, so don't worry about it. What's important is that it exploded and it caused the plane to shoot up 2,000 feet. And what they saw was that magical rise in 2,000 foot elevation before the plane broke apart and fell to the ocean.
Sure. Okay, so let's let's play this one and see if this is what you're looking for. It's only 37 seconds. So if it's not, I can try the one after. So just give me a thumbs up if it's good.
Lay it on me.
His conclusion: the eyewitnesses did not see a missile.
Yeah, that is the CIA's animation. That explosion caused the nose to come off, and it sent the plane streaking upwards on fire. So what people saw wasn't a missile. They're just stupid common folk. What they saw was the plane magically shooting upwards in elevation 2,000 feet before breaking apart and exploding and falling down. So
Right,
like,
and it still didn't explain what they said. They said that they saw wings severed. That did not illustrate that at all.
yeah, the whole video is gobbledygook, garbage, malarkey, poppycock.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. If you just or happen to be listening to this, I recommend trying to find the video. And I'm going to tell you that I don't think it's that easy to find. I ended up doing some deeper digging to try to find this animation of that. So it's not like super easy to find it. I can drop it in the show notes if I remember. I'll try, but it's ridiculous. It looks like some invisible force, like an invisible reverse guillotine or guillotine goes straight up and severs the nose of the plane. That's what this animation looks like.
Yep. In the video, the CIA narrator says, just after the aircraft exploded, it pitched up abruptly and climbed several thousand feet from its last recorded altitude of about 13,800 feet to a maximum altitude of about 17,000 feet. The animation showed the plane doing just that. Then, as the narrator explained, when the nose of the plane broke off, the sudden loss of mass caused the plane to turn up and climb. This is a bunch of garbage. This rocketing noseless 747 was what witnesses repeatedly described as an ascending white light resembling a flare or firework, according to the CIA narrator. So we can tell that story is just cover your ass. The FBI and the NTSB never officially endorsed that, but that video was thrown out there to the public, and it was done by design to cause enough confusion that some schlep out there is going to say, oh shoot, maybe that is what I saw. Okay, yeah, the establishment loves us and they're trying to help us, so they're probably right. Right, Ashley?
Yeah, I mean, I think that by nature of trying to overall, you know, and this goes back also to our propaganda series, right? That a deliberate effort was made originally by private business and then by big government, and they were kind of competing factors until they really came together to be on the same page, right? But that tells us that big government and big business understood these principles of propaganda. They also understood, especially by this point in the 90s, of people's trust in authority and the idea that they had made an effort to get people to trust authority. And so I think that even though it was never endorsed by anybody either way, or like by these other government agencies that you're saying, the endorsement didn't actually matter because it came from the CIA. So when you have a population that largely is going to be trusting the CIA and intelligence, that's all you need to do. Even if they're like, well, we never said that's what happened, we just released the animation. But that implies that they are telling you that that is what happened. So it's like, fool me twice.
Only once, but twice.
I like what you did there. The propaganda angle. And of course, the people that put together those videos were given, you know, medals of merit by the CIA, of course, because, you know, why not? All right, Ashley, I got to read for a minute because I want to get to the important part. I think you can go to the next picture, next slide that we have set up. All right, perfectly. Perfect. I'm going to read some of the actual witness testimonies of what they saw. So this may take a couple minutes. Close your eyes if you must. Try to imagine what they saw. Do whatever helps. 5 days after TWA 800's destruction, witness 82 told Suffolk County police detectives that she was sitting at Smith's Point Beach when she saw a flare shoot from the water and fly upwards in a concave arc. As the woman reported, the flare had a pink flame that turned orange as it ascended and was followed by a thin black smoke trail. She watched the object for about 5 seconds before it turned into a large ball of orange fire. Witness 129 was fishing with a friend off a jetty in the Mauritius Inlet when he saw to his southeast a flare rising upwards. He then saw a small flash followed by a large explosion. A huge fireball then fell to the ocean in 2 pieces. Witness 144, named Ann DeCaro, was walking around the track at Mastic Beach High School with a friend when she noticed a plane traveling west to east, the direction TWA 800 was heading. She then saw an object to the right with a bright orange glow with a white streak behind it. She saw a bright orange fireball, which broke into 2 pieces and fell straight down. She told the FBI she heard no sound nor felt any thunder, and was one of the few witnesses to insist she saw a missile. Witness 166, a veteran of the Polish army with missile experience, was at a park in Lindenhurst with his wife when he noticed something ascending, like white, yellow fire trailed by black smoke. He heard a shh sound. The object arched slightly at top. He then observed an explosion. After hearing the news of the crash, he contacted the FBI to say he had seen a missile. Of course. Witness 241, while walking around the track at West Hampton High School, quote, observed a bright white light arching into the sky. At its apex, the light appeared to fizzle out. Then moments later, a huge explosion occurred. The FBI agent reported that she did not hear any sound or explosion. So take that with a grain of salt because that was coming from the FBI. Witness 282, a master sergeant with the New York Air National Guard, had just parachuted into his base at Gabreski Airport as part of an exercise. He was on the ground looking south when he saw what looked like a flare at about 2,500 to 3,000 feet, traveling from west to east. The object was orange with a pink center. It also had a very faint grayish-white plume. The flare then erupted into a fireball, and the fireballs fell straight down and broke into two. Although the witness was interviewed by an NYPD detective and an FBI agent, neither appeared to inquire about sound. They seem to be avoiding people asking about people hearing sound. Witness 358 was fishing off a boat in Mauritius Inlet with friends when he saw a flare-like object for 8 to 10 seconds, at which time it turned into a bright yellowish-orange glow. This glow then turned into a wide flame that fell towards the ocean in two pieces. The FBI agents do not appear to have inquired about sound.
Isn't that interesting?
Isn't that? And what a coinky-dink.
The other thing that is so bizarre about that, Sean, is that these people are not just, regular people. They're people who are trained in the military, and it's not just one of them. It's several of them. And maybe not everybody's going to have all of these particular same experience level, education level, knowledge base. But that's a lot of people that are involved in this witness pool that have some type of training and would very likely be considered a highly valuable witness. It's bizarre.
Couldn't agree more. Witness 491 was fishing with some buddies off a dock in Center Mauritius when he observed a red light moving up into the air. It was moving in an irregular type arc in a southeasterly direction. He followed this red flare for an estimated 30 seconds and felt it was trying to follow something. The flare then suddenly turned into a huge ball of flame and fell in two pieces. Interviewed in July 1996 by the FBI and a New York State police investigator, the witness made no comment about sound. Allegedly. Witness 558, that's witness 558, was on fire duty for the Air National Guard at Gabreski Airport. As he told the FBI 5 days after the crash, he noticed a red flare or Roman candle ascending above the tree line, gaining altitude and bearing in a southeasterly direction. He watched the flare ascend for as long as 30 seconds, lost it for a split second, then observed a large fireball erupt in the sky before becoming a ball of fire which separated into two equally sized balls dropping from the sky with no audible sound. The FBI interviewed him again a day later. His story remained the same.
Okay, so let me just clarify here, Sean. All of these people either said they heard no sound or they were not asked about their sound?
Either their testimony of the sound they heard was omitted from the report, or they didn't comment about the sound. Maybe they didn't hear the sound, but there seems to be this theme where the FBI is purposely commenting in their reports that witness didn't hear any sounds. Witness didn't hear any sound.
Okay.
Witness made no comment about sound. Is that true or not? I don't know, but one we already talked about did hear multiple explosions.
Right.
So more than one probably heard, out of 700 witnesses, probably heard more than one explosion. And collating all that data, if you're coming up with a story to spin this with, you'd want to make up the sound portion on your own if you were trying to cover something up or point the blame on something, or say it was just an internal spark that's, lopped the nose off and then it went magically upwards 2,000 feet and then fell, and then there was an explosion and fire. I don't know. I really can't comment on it. I don't know, but it seems a little bit fishy to me. Let's go to witness 649, Joseph Delgado. He had a phone interview with the FBI on the 18th of July, 1996, so a day after the crash. Then 2 agents visited him on the 19th of July, the next day, with more questions. He described seeing an elongated object ascend from behind the trees vertically in a squiggly pattern, then arced to the southwest. He saw object number 2, which glittered in the sun's reflection. It appeared to him that object 1 was going to miss object 2. But then he saw a white puff and 2 objects descend in balls of fire. He believed what he saw ascend was a missile. But authorities were not done with Delgado. But wait, there's more. On May 8th, 1997, so 9 months later, 2 agents from the FBI and a representative. Now listen closely. Let me read that again. Pay attention. On the 8th of May, 1997, 2 agents from the FBI and a representative from the Naval Air Warfare Center in China Lake, California, visited him. Funny they're involved. Despite pressing him and pressing his story, he had not changed a single thing and still was pressing them that he believed he saw a missile. They showed him a drawing of the event, collated, they claim, from another quote unquote key witness. This is intimidation tactics. But this drawing excluded the missile shooting upwards. Still, Delgado wouldn't budge on his story and was denied to their faces that the drawing was correct. So heavy intimidation practices on this guy 9 months after his 2 interviews. Pretty incredible. The FBI and CIA also tried to change the story of FBI witness number 32, Dwight Brumley, who was featured in the documentary Silenced. He was a passenger on U.S. Air Flight 217, which was flying just above TWA Flight 800. He witnessed a flare. That's what he describes it as, quote unquote, a flare passed beneath his plane. It was heading north, then arced up and peaked, and then turned into a fireball. The CIA video of TWA 800 more or less shows his perspective minus the flare. Questions, comments, concerns?
Yes. What would be big enough to cause an airline pilot to describe something that he could see from his plane as a Roman candle?
Very interesting.
That's weird.
They probably weren't seeing another plane shoot directly upwards towards TWA 800. It sounds to me like some kind of missile, some kind of incendiary device, something flying through the air that it's not a drum bomb being dropped from above. It sounds like a missile. Do you agree?
Yes, I do.
Any other comments before we move on?
Nope. Just, again, we've talked about the fact that so many of these people were, as you had talked about earlier, like so much of this is playbook. This is people, witnesses seeing something, trying to do the right thing, report to the authorities, and then they're discredited, harassed, threatened, testimony changed, lied about, discredited in some way. And of course, this is overlap with the Oklahoma City bombing. We talked about that a little bit earlier this week, in that there were, I believe, if I remember correctly, like 24. Now, there's much more for this, but there was like 24 witnesses that said that they saw someone with Timothy McVeigh. Originally, the authorities were searching for John Doe number 2, and then all of a sudden, John Doe number 2 completely falls off the radar. It's like he didn't even exist, and these people were basically ignored for what they said, what they were trying to contribute to finding the truth.
Absolutely. The old playbook. Demonize the witnesses, hide the witnesses. I think we are ready for the next slide. We're not done with witnesses, but the bulk of them are done. Okay. Learning a lesson now, the NTSB, because I did mention them before. That's the National Transportation Safety Board. Founded in 1967, was made independent in 1974. Their role was made to investigate all major civilian transport accidents and to do so without political pressure, hence making them independent in 1974. In 1992, Ashley, your favorite president, President Clinton, changed this. He appointed to the NTSB board an Al Gore crony named Jim Hall, pictured on the left, with no experience in shit.
Sounds familiar. Sounds very familiar. Sounds just like every administration ever. Sounds like Donald Trump's administration.
It's a great point. We're picking on the Clinton administration in this presentation, but this is a tale as old as time. The song as old as rhyme, Beauty and the Beast. Every single administration does this same thing where they appoint their cronies into positions of power. This one just happened to have to deal with TWA Flight 800. So Clinton appoints Jim Hall with no experience. Years later, that's in 1992. Years later, Clinton appoints him as chairman of the NTSB. Clinton then put his go-to guy, as he called him, in the second spot at NTSB. His name was Robert Francis, pictured in the middle. A true Clinton loyalist he was. What a great-looking fella. Now, keep in mind that every single transport accident, every civilian accident is under the purview of the NTSB. They get jurisdiction. Remember that accident? Was it the train crash 2 years ago, letting all the chemicals into the air? Was it the
East Palestine,
East
Ohio?
Palestine, Ohio. Are we going to get censored for saying the P word?
Maybe.
East
and the P word, East P, Ohio. But the thing about that it was interesting. It's not like things just started happening there. You know, things have been happening in that area, in the Middle East version of that place, for a very long time. But we certainly saw a ratcheting up of violence in that area not long after that. And I know that this is not provable, but some people think that things like that happen in order to confuse and muddy and bury headlines. I don't actually know if that's really the case, but I would think that it's at least a possibility that manipulation of searches would happen by having names be similar or the same, and then you have your search algorithm manipulated so you just see what they want you to see, and it makes it more difficult. In the same way that, like, when we were looking for pictures of Terry Stacey, that there is and I'm not saying that this was done intentionally. I'm just saying it makes it difficult because there was a director and somebody who was involved in film and whatever named Terry Stacey as well. And so those search results kind of get muddied, and it's difficult to actually find what you're looking for about who you're looking for. So maybe nothing, but maybe something.
Very true. Regardless, that East Palestine train accident was investigated by NTSB. Just as an example, every civilian transport accident, they get jurisdiction over unless it is deemed criminal. So when people are looking for answers, I see in the news or hear amongst the water cooler at work, how come so-and-so's not giving us answers. Really, we would look in this case to the NTSB. So TWA Flight 800 should have been under the purview of the NTSB. There was nothing provable criminal at the moment, so they would get first dibs.
Right. Quick question, Sean. Sorry to interrupt, but during that time that you were discussing East Palestine, I believe, wasn't Pete Buttigieg over the NTSB at that time? And people were very frustrated about the inaction of that. Or is the Department of Transportation what he was over?
Transportation Secretary.
Okay.
Transportation Secretary. So maybe times have changed and Transport Secretary oversees that. No, it wouldn't, because they're supposed to be independent investigative board that is apolitical. Obviously,
Gotcha.
Every organization in the United States has some level of corruptibility and is probably already overtaken with corruption, but yeah, I'm not sure if Pete Buttigieg was involved in any of that at all. However you say his name. All right.
You have to admit, it's a challenging name to say.
It is the Buttigieg. So after TWA 800 crash, when the Department of Justice attorneys moved to take over the investigation, Robert Francis was on the scene to let them. This move flirted with illegality. By law, the FBI could only seize control if Department of Justice attorneys declared the crash a crime scene. But this they did not do and never would. According to Title 49, Section 1131 of the U.S. Code, an NTSB investigation, quote, has priority over any investigation by another department, agency, or instrumentality of the United States government, end quote. If the FBI were to run a parallel investigation, the NTSB was to authorize and oversee it. The opposite happened with TWA.
And I was thinking too, like, I don't know, maybe this is a stupid question, but like, if there was no criminal investigation taking place, if we're just assuming that what we said happened, which was that there was this malfunction with the plane, then why would these people be criminally liable for taking 2 pieces of foam or 2 pieces of fabric from a seat? If there's no criminal investigation, I mean, I guess it could just be, this is government property now. It is under 8 investigation. So maybe that's it. But it seems like that you would, in a fair situation, that you may have a more difficult time prosecuting people who did that if there is no criminal investigation, which is why you have it to investigate it. Like, then what's the problem? But I don't know. Maybe that's not the right question. I don't know. I'm just spitballing.
No, you're on the right track, and we're going to get to that, because there was a lot of confusion in the beginning, and even mainstream articles were saying, well, this could be this, it could be that. So there was this air of we're not sure, but we're investigating. Doesn't seem criminal, but we're open to all possibilities, and that would just kind of be to cover their ass, so they can never be wrong with whatever the answer is. So continuing on, the night of the crash, the FBI was already in charge. So who authorized the FBI takeover? The answer, Hall and Francis, the guy on the left and on the middle. They were political people, after all, not professionals. To boot, you can add in Dr. David Mayer, pictured on the right, the head of the National Transportation Safety Board's quote-unquote witness group. He claims that in 1998, he was given hundreds of FBI interviews, none of which saw the initial explosion. A liar! Duh. So he's a cover-up artist. He's what we may call a spin doctor. Maybe some would call him a spook. You probably would, Ashley. I wouldn't go that far, but maybe.
You tend to be more moderate than me, Sean. We all know that you're in the moderate end of fruits, nuts, and flakes.
That's true. The arc of granola, fruits, nuts, and flakes. This guy, David Mayer, was covering for the FBI and CIA. Turns out he actually manufactured and distorted witness details, which he relayed in several congressional hearings. Mayer even included in his fuckery fake missile tests to test what the witnesses saw. I can't go into too much detail into that, but basically he had fake missiles fired from the shoreline and then videotaped it to see if what was seen with a fake missile would actually be what witnesses saw, and claims that it was nothing like the descriptions of what people were seeing. So a whole bunch of tomfoolery, of course. You can read all about it if you buy the books. He also spearheaded the idea of the fuel tank explosion occurring before a hypothetical missile could have reached TWA 800. So he is a total bullshit artist. Mayer championed the CIA video that we talked about that showed the plane catching fire and shooting up set to 17,000 feet before exploding and splitting in two. By the way, no witness ever saw that. Witnesses saw TWA stop dead in its tracks. It did not catch fire and shoot upwards. It did not catch fire and move forwards. It was like it was described as if it hit a brick wall dead in its spot and fell down. Witness 551, also aboard U.S. Air Flight 217, said it appeared TWA 800 hit a stone wall of light. Witness number 150, Lisa Perry, noticed a cylindrical object moving at high speed, then a commercial airliner at the same altitude. The object moved to the side of the craft, and then a puff of smoke. The plane stopped dead in its tracks, split, and fell gracefully. We can also enter into the chat Captain Bauer flying Air National Guard, an Air National Guard chopper with co-pilot Major Meyer that we did talk about. Both saw the dead in its tracks TWA explosion, but both were following different objects. How interesting. So they both saw two different things heading towards the plane. One saw an object heading east, the same direction as TWA 800. The other saw one traveling west, each exploding at or near TWA 800, blowing it out of the sky.
Not only once, but twice.
Doesn't really fit, but two. So the Air National Guard is seeing two things fly towards a meeting point right next to TWA 800 and exploding. How do you feel about that bit of information?
I just can't believe the amount of people that are in the military or who have military experience who were witnesses, and they would say these things and nothing was done to address what they're saying. I mean, that's completely insane.
It totally is. That's why I liked this book to cover, because it really went into the cover up and the conspiracy and not just pure evidence. I can't cover all the cover up. I can't cover all of the evidence. There's plenty more out there. We only have a 2-part podcast to cover this. Otherwise it would be 12 hours of multiple parts to cover everything. But anyway, let's move on to the next picture, Ashley, if you would. The beautiful trans-world plane. So going back to that documentary Silenced, it was released in June 2001. Right after it's released, TWA and Boeing workers and pilots started reaching out to Cashel and Sanders. They all believed the missile story, and many mentioned to them, follow the money. Some even recalled the Pentagon visits to the TWA CEO in Kansas City in the weeks following the crash. By the way, TWA folded at the end of 2001. So maybe we'll dedicate some of this show to the people that lost their jobs, because TWA never recovered from this crash. That was a whole industry. That was one of the biggest airlines in North America, and literally dropped out of existence like TWA 800. I feel horrible for these people. Horrible. And I believe their hub was in Kansas City. So let's go to the next picture. Fit to print. I think you've got it up. The beautiful New York Times, the bastions of truth. Bullshit. All right. Immediately following the downing, we're going back in time now. Immediately following the downing of TWA Flight 800, journalists fled to Long Island. But little reporting went beyond what they were told by the FBI. Pressure was coming from the White House, the Justice Department, the go-to Clinton guy / fixer, Robert Francis at the NTSB, and curiously, the CIA. The papers toyed with terrorism, terror attacks. They toyed with bombs in the beginning, but there was little to no serious missile consideration. About mid-August 1996, 1 month into the investigation, a couple articles popped up discussing the PETN traces found inside the plane. PETN is pentoerythritol tetranitrate, which is in the same family as nitroglycerin. This helped actually keep quiet the missilers, according to the FBI. So it was helpful to the establishment because an internal bomb is not the same as an external missile. And it really sounds like they're trying to avoid talking about a missile. So it's a good misdirect.
Well, and I just wanted to say too, a lot of times it's really interesting to see what the story is in the first couple of days, not because that is exactly what happened, and especially in these cases where investigation does need to happen, but it is interesting to see the evolution of the story. And that was one of the reasons why you're asking me to find something about explosives, because the story changed so much during this time. But I wanted to say, so if you are, this is hard to see. And the reason that I did the entire screenshot was because I just wanted to show that this was front page news on the New York Times. So the one on the left-hand screen says TWA jetliner leaving New York for Paris crashes in Atlantic, more than 220 aboard. This was like the next day. So it happened on the 17th, and then this was the headline news on the 18th. Then I believe the one on the right was maybe like July 19th. So this was really early days. Investigators suspect explosive device as the likeliest cause for crash of Flight 800. But there's many different examples of the newspaper kind of having a little bit of these different headlines. And then, as Sean said, though, for a very long time, this was above the fold. This was front page news. And it's just interesting to follow the breadcrumbs to see how these types of things change and evolve over time.
Very well said. And as I mentioned, finding the rumor of this PETN explosive residue was kind of a savior to the establishment because it meant an internal bomb. And maybe we can cover our asses by saying an internal bomb. Yes, missile. See, it wasn't a missile after all. Ashley, let me give you one guess as to who the newspapers were blaming on a bomb. What country was it rumored that placed a bomb on this plane?
I'm going with Iran.
That is correct. Back in 1996, of course, blame Iran. Tale as old as time.
We do have, I'm sorry, we do have a comment that said PETN is made from propylene glycol. Thank you, Nostra.
And that is it's also used in antifreeze, I believe. But
not sure, not a scientist.
Yeah, I am a scientist, and I don't know, but I'm not an explosives chemist. I'm a biochemist.
Sure, Sean. It's always excuses with you.
Thank you. So anyway, they're able to take this compound that's similar in the same family as nitroglycerin. It's not nitroglycerin, but it's in the same family, and say, maybe we could finger point towards a bomb. And of course, White House is okay with this because it isn't a missile. Regardless, when one article started pointing to the explosives evidence, the next would say that tests were inconclusive. Of course. So purposeful confusion, brilliant propaganda plan. Tale as old as time. Any other comments on the newspaper section, Ashley?
No, just that it would be interesting to try to track down like a day by day in the New York Times. I'm curious about that. And actually, in our work through this, I did get a little sub to the New York Times. It's like the New York Time Travel or something like that.
Did you
The New
vomit
York
when you
Time
did that?
Traveler. I did not vomit. I'm supporting the old gray lady, but that is what you can use to get the archives. And I was kind of on a time crunch, so I wasn't sure. Some people can get access to the archives through their library card, whatever. I didn't have time to run that down. So I have a temporary sub to the New York Times so I can get their archives. And I also have the newspapers.com, but they do not have the New York Times archives. So
Gotcha. All right, let's move on to our next section. Oh, excellent. A whole bunch of nothing burgers. The anatomy of a cover-up, the black hole. So let me read something to you, because this was, again, like we said, above the fold, ongoing investigation for years, on everybody's minds. 230 people killed, leading to the downfall of an entire airline. No clear answers, conspiracy theories, more articles, magazines, constantly talked about. Probably was on Oprah. I got no idea. I'm taking a gander out there, but it probably was on Oprah. In his 957-page 2004 memoir, My Life, Bill Clinton spent only one paragraph on TWA 800, and that a roughly dishonest one. Quote, "At the time, everyone assumed, nothing wrongly as it turned out, that this was a terrorist attack." Bad Clinton impression. I'm sorry.
very bad. Cool it. He's not some Italian.
That was supposed to
He-
be an Arkansonian accent.
Correct.
Fine.
But
I'll just read it normal.
You're going Italian here a little bit.
Okay. So in that 1,000-page book where he put 2 sentences about this, about TWA, says, "At the time, everyone assumed, wrongly as it turned out, that this was a terrorist attack. There was even speculation that the plane had been downed by a rocket fired from a boat in Long Island Sound." And that's absolute poppycock gobbledygook garbage, because Long Island Sound is on the north side. Nobody even claimed that. So he's doing a double fake out, this son of a beach.
Well, and I just want to throw in here, we had talked about this a little bit before, but I find it very, very interesting that the biggest scandal that we know about and we remember, and for whatever reason, this was what was on the news. And I think it might have been Handy had said last time, or somebody said this last time, there's like, depends on what the definition of is. That was his very famous, very public prosecution or cross-examination or deposition or whatever that was, where he was talking about the Monica Lewinsky scandal. Now, if we look at everything that happened in the Clinton administration, the fact that was what made all of the television shows, all of the daytime talk show, all of the news, that's what it was. That it depends on what the definition of is. The blue dress, the young girl, the cigar, that was the scandal. And not Boys on the Track, and not Waco, and not OKC, and not TWA, and not wagging the dog in Bosnia-Herzegovina. None of those things. It's really galling and incredible when we look back and think about that was what they presented to us as what mattered when all of this other stuff was going on. And it was a scandal-filled presidency. Now, again, many of us in this space, we think they're all scandal-filled because they're constantly doing things that violate human rights, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all of these things. They're always doing that. So I'm not saying that this doesn't apply in so many ways to basically every president, but just looking at that particular snapshot, it is just, it is infuriating. And especially looking back with our tie-in for propaganda, that was what came out of the scandal of his career. None of this other stuff that was so much more egregious and disgusting and on American soil. That's the crazy thing too. All of that happened right here, you know? It's unbelievable.
Wow, couldn't have said it better myself. They are the master manipulators. Are they not? I don't have a picture of her up here. You all know what she looks like. Our favorite person, Hillary Clinton, in her 528-page memoir called Living History. Hillary just spent 1/3 of a sentence on TWA Flight 800, which for her was merely one out of several tragic events that summer. So, nothing burger from her as well in her memoir. I guess it didn't matter to them. We're barking up the wrong tree here. Now let's look at this schlep on the left, George Tenet, the director of Central Intelligence at the time. In the aftermath of the plane's destruction, George Tenet served as acting director of Central Intelligence. The new CIA documents that collected by FOIA. The new CIA documents show him to have been involved in the investigation of TWA 800 from nearly the very beginning. Indeed, he signed off on the CIA's ultimate explanation months before the FBI shared that explanation with the public. Yet he too failed to even mention the disaster at all in his 2007 memoir, At the Center of the Storm. So he didn't even mention TWA. FOIA documents show that he was involved from day one and was spearheading the CIA's movements, and he didn't even give it a sentence.
Yeah,
in his memoir.
It's really
freaking believable.
It's really incredible. It's galling to the families. And the other thing too is that we talked about this. This is the way you memory hole something, because eventually things change generationally. Memory changes, right? Most kids today don't know anything about this. And if they were to be interested in these figures, then they would read it and they would not even make the connection. That is one tiny way that you memory hole a subject, a scandal, a tragedy.
Yep, right down the memory hole. And let's add as honorable mention the guy on the right on your screen. That's Richard Clarke, White House chronicler and author, went on 60 Minutes in 2004 for a Clinton tell-all. No mention of TWA Flight 800.
I feel like I should read all these books. Like I'm sure I probably won't, but I'm curious, what do they actually do talk about? Do they mention any of the things that happened during that time? Do they mention Waco, OKC? Are they even talked about, or are they also ignored?
I have no idea. I'm not. You can read these books, Ashley. I'm not reading Clinton's memoir, Hillary's memoir, George Tenet's memoir. I don't even want to revisit the 60 Minutes that Richard Clarke was on. I have no interest in these people.
I know.
But you can read it and we can do a show about it.
You know, it could be an interesting, it could be interesting. I don't know. I have to say I'm curious, but I think I would have a really hard time getting through.
I'm sure there are some gold nuggets. I shouldn't light it all on fire. I'm sure there are a couple little gold nuggets in there. It's just for our argument today, it is very strange that this pivotal event in the Clinton administration got no more than a couple sentences in the Clintons' memoirs.
Yeah,
and the CIA director's memoirs didn't even bother with it, which is very strange.
Agreed.
I'm not sure what picture you have next. We're almost at the end of part one. Oh, perfect. Okay, great. On the left of the screen, that's Jim Kallstrom, the FBI's TWA Flight 800 investigation lead. He seemed to have sold the bomb theory a little bit too well, as long as it wasn't a missile, right? The media and victims' families were beginning to vocalize their agreement with Kallstrom because he's the figurehead. He's at Calverton. He's with the wreckage. He keeps saying the word bomb early August of 1996. As the author states, as Cashel states, it seems like he sold the bomb theory a little bit too well. Of course, Iran was the number one culprit. But there's a problem.
I think you already said that, Sean, but tale as old as time.
Song as old as rhyme.
Beauty and the Beast.
Yep. On August 31st of 1996, articles claim investigators found traces of explosive residue inside the craft and outside the craft, specifically on the right wing, which means someone was blowing the whistle. Recall that the right wing is where witnesses claimed to see missile impact, and the residue on the right wing was RDX, also known as cyclonite or hexogen. RDX and PETN are prime ingredients in Semtex, aka plastic explosive. Enter. I think he's the guy on the right in the photo. Enter National Transportation Safety Board accident investigator Hank Hughes. Was he in the one in the middle? I forget. Yeah, guy on the right. Whistleblower, by the way. I'm not sending this guy to the woodshed. This is a good story. This is a feel-good story. NTSB accident investigator Hank Hughes. In 1999, he went public. During the crash reconstruction at Calverton in 1996, he claims firsthand that the FBI was running a parallel investigation and that they bullied the NTSB from day one. He claimed that the FBI would only show the NTSB what they wanted them to see. He claimed the FBI failed to respect evidence and honor the chain of custody, citing disappearing parts from the hangar. Hank Hughes believed the FBI was doing everything it could to make an external explosion look like an internal one. One example his colleague Jim Spear discussed publicly was... This is Jim Spear that's pictured in the middle of the three gentlemen. Another whistleblower. Please clap inside your minds for him. Quoting Spear, I asked them to swab it and test it in their demonstration, which they did, and the part tested positive for nitrates. This threw the testers into a panic. One of them picked up the phone, made a call, and in nanoseconds, 3 agents in suits came in running. The agents huddled with the testers before informing me the machine had frequent false positives. Of course, they ran the test several times without letting me watch. When finished, the lead agent turned to me and said, all the rest of the tests were negative. We will declare the overall test negative, and the first one you saw, well, we'll call that a false positive. Tales all this time, Ashley. The TWA's Bob Young, who worked with the NTSB on the investigation, witnessed this incident. As he noted, and Spear confirmed, the FBI sent this part to Washington for further testing. It never came back. This was a common phenomena. In his otherwise innocuous testimony before Grassley's subcommittee, Donald Kerr, the FBI lab director, casually boasted that the FBI lab examiners sent 116 pieces of debris to FBI lab in Washington for further testing. This was 116 more pieces than Kallstrom would admit to sending. So they're messing with the evidence. As you do. There's many more examples in a lot of these books and these documentaries about how honest NTSB employees were losing faith in the FBI and losing faith in their organization after seeing what they felt was a cover-up. I don't have enough time to go through all of them. This is just 2 of them. This is Hank Hughes and Jim Spear. You can look more of them up on your own. It's too much for me to cover any others in this presentation because we're kind of wrapping up for part 1. But I will describe one story, which is pretty fascinating. On September 19th, 1996, the government went public with its change in direction. Go to the next slide, please, Ashley. No more was it bombs or explosives. It was just mechanical failure. This lie was supplemented and spearheaded by the New York Times and their articles. Gone were the radar blips. Gone were the objects. Gone were the witnesses that saw missiles strike TWA. But what about all that explosive evidence? Well, On Friday, September 20th, 1996, the FBI released a statement that TWA had, quote, previously been used in a law enforcement training exercise for bomb detection dogs, end quote. That was the source of the explosives material residue. Now, the author describes in details his discussion with the dog trainer. So let me stop for a second. Does that make sense, Ashley? The FBI says it was all a mistake. We figured it out. All of this residue from bombs that's being detected or missiles, whatever, explosives residue in the plane, it's all coming from a dog. It's coming from dog training that was done on that plane the day prior. So don't worry about it, anybody. There was no missile. There was no bomb on the plane. What they do is they put a bunch of missile or explosive material on a plane. They bring in a search dog as a regular training exercise, and the dog is sent in to sniff it out as part of their training. And some of the residue must have been kept there, and that's what was being found on the plane. Can you freaking believe it?
Well, in some ways I can, because what this reminded me of was it is hard to say what is intentional and what isn't. But basically, when we were all surviving through COVID times, one of the things that was very obvious was a changing story every single day. Something was different. What I told you today is not what I'm telling you tomorrow. What I'm telling you tomorrow is going to be different the day after that. And it's constantly changing, constantly evolving. And then the other common thread is that no one is held accountable for when they lie to the entire American public. And this reminds me of that. And not only that, this story is so ridiculous and so absurd. It is so insulting to the victims and their families. And I have to wonder, like, who came up with this? And if that was actually the case, then you should be able to provide documentation that this actually happened. Now, of course, I'm sure they could come up with something and fake something. But if that's the case, then why wouldn't that already be discussed? There may be bomb residue. And of course, I wouldn't really believe that either, but at least they would have gotten ahead of it and say, like, this was actually used for this purpose. This is a test purpose, whatever. It's such nonsense. It's very frustrating.
It totally is. And it was totally made up. It's a total cover story. Jack Cashel describes his discussion with the dog trainer. He tracked down the dog trainer that was stationed in Kansas City, training dogs that right before the day of and the day before the TWA 800 explosion, found the trainer and the dog that the FBI blamed this on. And turns out, according to this trainer, they got the plane wrong and the date wrong. So the FBI did a little bit of their homework, but they didn't take it far enough because they didn't get the timing right or the plane right. This guy does use explosives on planes for his dog, but they got the other details wrong. They're putting a square peg in a round hole, unfortunately. So, rounding it up for part one, 3 weeks after the dog training story broke and 4 weeks before the election, President Clinton signed an aviation bill into law that included a range of cumbersome programs designed to prevent passengers from bringing bombs onto commercial planes. Oh, good for you, Billy boy. Oh, Billy boy. It will improve the security of air travel, says Clinton. It will carry forward our fight against terrorism, end quote. In attendance at the White House signing were several people who lost loved ones on TWA Flight 800. Propaganda, anyone? Unwitting props in Clinton's effort to showcase himself as a can-do steward tackling the nation's problems. Nowhere in the Times article just cited was the word missile even mentioned. That possibility largely been relegated to the realm of the grassy knollers. With more than a little help from the media, Clinton managed to turn a national security disaster of major proportions into a pre-election photo op. 16 years later, Hillary Clinton would attempt to do much the same with Benghazi.
Benghazi. I wasn't even thinking about that, but it's terrible.
Absolutely. Who let the dogs out, Ashley? We don't have any more slides, right? That's all I have for part one.
For
I
part
hope
one.
you enjoyed it. Do you have any questions for me?
Yes, I did enjoy it, and I thought you put this presentation together very well, and I want to thank you for all the time that you spent putting all of this together. So can you give us a little high level overview of what we're going to be getting into for part two?
Yes, I can do that. Well, in the very beginning, we mentioned this P-3 Orion naval plane that was flying high above TWA Flight 800 when it exploded, and it actually flew down in elevation and filmed the wreckage. We will be talking about that. We will be talking about the Navy. We will be talking about submarines that we know for a fact were in the area, 3 of them specifically. We will be talking about some missile. I don't want to give anything away. People probably know it already. Some missile testing exercises that were done in the Atlantic Ocean, or maybe around that exact area just south of Long Island in the preceding days, weeks, months to TWA exploding. So deep dive into the Navy. We'll be talking about the black boxes. You know, they're not actually black, but the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder. What about those? What does that show? What evidence do they have? Were there any strange radar blips? We'll be covering that. We'll be looking into deals that Boeing specifically made as a result of this crash and this coverage. We'll be talking about specific executive orders that were signed by Clinton to silence anyone in the Navy talking about special operations. Hint, hint, wink, wink. And then we'll be going into some more whistleblowers and some more FBI and CIA tomfoolery, a little bit more on George Tenet. We'll be talking about some engine issues. I don't want to give too much away. We'll be talking about some FOIA lawsuits. We'll be bringing up Christina Borjeson's work. We'll be talking about some FOIA received videos of these strange training exercises that were being done in the Atlantic Ocean just south of Long Island in the days leading up to the event, and kind of round it all out with a whodunit, and then we will speculate because we really don't know. It's kind of circumstantial evidence, and I don't think we'll ever know the answer to this. But as long as the victims and their families know that we're not giving up, we're still digging, we still have you on our minds, and we're not going to stop.
Yeah, and I think that you're right. We are speculating and we are pointing out things that simply do not make any sense. And if everything was on the up and up, these questions would be answered. That's the bottom line. And there's so many of these things that don't add up, that were not done on the up and up, that would not make sense in any logical, reasonable world. So I think it's fair to keep asking the questions, and we know that these people they do not have justice. So thank you so much for bringing this to my attention and for putting this presentation together for all of us. And I do hope that everyone has enjoyed the work that we have been doing. We do have our 2-part propaganda series and our introductory episode. All of that has been published this week. It's available on the Fool Me Twice channel on Rumble and on YouTube. And we are going to be doing a live part 2. I'm going to try to let everyone know when that's happening, but please like, subscribe, and share the show. If you think that someone would be interested in this, please drop us a comment if you enjoyed the work, all that good stuff. It really helps us to hopefully grow our platform and reach new people to bring together in this community, as well as have an exchange of ideas, and hopefully put something out there that people still care about the victims of these events. So I wanted to shout out the chat We have a few people there that is kind of picked up over the evening. So I really appreciate everyone taking your time to be here with us, to support the show, to, just to be here while we're here doing this. And it means a lot. So Sweets, Doc Spoiler, Nostradamus, Greg Talent, Karen Carpenter, Will Tabox, iHandy, Jason Barker, Ghost Art, Wally Walrus, excuse me. And I hope that I did not miss anybody. Oh, I see Tara Preda Wild here commenting. Great show. Thank you. And thank you guys so much. Everybody that's been in the chat tonight, we truly appreciate you. I truly do not take it lightly that you choose to spend your time with us. It means so much. Sean, thank you for all of your time putting this together. And I'm really happy with it. And I'm excited about where we go next with Fool Me Twice.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ashley.
Okay. We'll talk to y'all later. Have a great evening, everybody.
Good night.